Have you ever noticed how some people remain completely calm while chaos swirls around them? While others panic, argue, or desperately try to control every situation, these individuals stand like ancient mountains, unmoved, centered, at peace. I'm not talking about people who suppress their emotions or pretend everything is fine. I'm talking about something far deeper, something the ancient Taoists discovered over 2,000 years ago. A secret so powerful that once you understand it, no one can ever truly disturb your inner peace again. Let me share something with you. There was a time in my life when everything felt like a threat to my tranquility. A critical comment from a colleague would ruin my entire day. Family expectations would keep me awake at night. Even a stranger's rudeness in traffic could trigger hours of inner turmoil. I was like a leaf in the wind, constantly blown about by external circumstances, never finding solid ground. Sound familiar? If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. Most people spend their entire lives as hostages to external events, never realizing there's another way. Then I discovered the Taoist principle that changed everything. And here's what surprised me most. It wasn't about becoming stronger or building thicker walls around my heart. It was about understanding something so simple, yet so profound, that it reversed my entire relationship with peace. The ancient Taoists understood something that modern psychology is only now beginning to validate. Inner peace isn't something you achieve by controlling external circumstances. It's not something you maintain by fighting off disturbances. True peace comes from a radical shift in how you relate to life itself. The Dao De Jing, written by the sage Laozi in the 6th century BCE, contains a teaching in chapter 26 that holds the key. It says, "The still is the master of unrest." Think about that for a moment. Not stillness fights unrest, or stillness avoids unrest. Stillness is the master of unrest. Let me tell you about Wu Wei, a Taoist monk who lived during the Ming dynasty in the 15th century. Historical records tell us that during a period of intense political turmoil, when armies were advancing and villages were being destroyed, Wu Wei remained in his mountain temple. Refugees who fled to his sanctuary were astonished by what they witnessed. While they arrived in states of panic, Wu Wei moved through his daily routines with absolute tranquility, tending his garden, preparing tea, sitting in meditation. One desperate merchant finally asked him, "Master, don't you understand? The armies are coming. Everything is falling apart. How can you remain so calm?" Wu Wei's response contained the essence of Taoist wisdom. He said, "The storm does not disturb the depths of the ocean. Only the surface is troubled. You are living on the surface. I have learned to live in the depths." This wasn't metaphorical philosophy to Wu Wei. It was practical reality. And here's what's remarkable. When the armies finally did arrive at his temple, the commanding officer, struck by the monk's inexplicable peace, ordered his men to leave the temple untouched. Wu Wei's peace literally created a field of protection around him. Now you might be thinking, that's a beautiful story, but I'm not a monk in ancient China. I'm dealing with demanding bosses, difficult relationships, financial pressures, and a world that demands constant reaction. I understand. I thought the same thing. But here's where the Taoist wisdom becomes intensely practical for your life right now, today. The Taoists discovered something neuroscience is only now confirming. When someone or something disturbs your peace, the disturbance doesn't actually come from the external event. It comes from your resistance to the event. Let me repeat that because it's crucial. The disturbance comes from your resistance. When your boss criticizes you unfairly, it's not the criticism itself that destroys your peace. It's your inner resistance, your belief that this shouldn't be happening, your fear of what it means, your desperate attempt to control the situation or change the other person's perception. The Taoists had a practice for this. They called it Wu Wei, often translated as non-action or effortless action. But here's what most people misunderstand about Wu Wei. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It doesn't mean becoming passive or letting people walk all over you. Wu Wei means acting from a place of inner stillness rather than from anxiety, fear, or the desperate need to control outcomes. Think of water flowing around a rock. The water doesn't fight the rock, doesn't stress about the rock, doesn't lose sleep worrying about the rock. It simply flows around it, naturally, effortlessly. That's Wu Wei. And here's the transformative part. When you stop fighting reality, you actually become far more effective at handling it. Let me share a modern example. I once knew a woman named Sarah who worked in a toxic office environment. Her manager was unpredictable, often blamed others for his mistakes, and created an atmosphere of constant tension. Sarah's co-workers dealt with this in two ways. Some fought back, arguing, defending themselves, getting angry, going to HR. basically spending all their energy resisting the situation. Others withdrew, becoming anxious, losing sleep, letting stress eat away at their health. Sarah tried both approaches. Nothing changed except that she became more miserable. Then Sarah learned about the Taoist principle of Wu Wei. She made a radical decision. She stopped resisting her manager's behavior. Not because she approved of it or agreed with it, but because she recognized that her resistance was only disturbing her own peace without changing anything. Here's what she did instead. When her manager blamed her unfairly, instead of defending herself with anxiety or arguing back with anger, she would pause, take a breath, and respond from stillness. I understand you're frustrated. Let me look into this and get back to you with the facts. Notice what Sarah did. She didn't fight. She didn't flee. She didn't absorb the negativity. She acted, but from a place of inner calm rather than reactive emotion. This is Wu Wei in action. Within 3 months, something remarkable happened. Her manager's behavior toward her began to change. Why? Because Sarah was no longer feeding the dynamic with her resistance. She had become like Jiang Wei's deep ocean, unruffled by surface storms. But here's the crucial lesson, and this is where most people go wrong when they first learn about these teachings. Sarah's peace didn't depend on her manager changing. That's the trap. If your peace depends on external circumstances being a certain way, then you're still a hostage, just with different chains. Sarah's transformation was internal. Whether her manager changed or not, she had learned to access a peace that couldn't be disturbed. Now I want to teach you the exact practice the Taoists used, and that I've adapted for modern life. This isn't theoretical philosophy. This is a practical technique you can start using within the next hour, and you should begin seeing results within 3 to 7 days. The practice has 3 parts, and I'll walk you through each one. First, the Taoists recognize that most disturbances to our peace begin in the mind, not in external reality. Chapter 16 of the Dao De Jing teaches, return to your roots in stillness. What this means practically is that before you can protect your peace from external disturbances, you need to establish peace internally first. You can't protect something you don't have. Here's your first exercise, and I want you to try this right after you finish listening to this. Set a timer for just 5 minutes. Find a quiet space. Close your eyes. Don't try to meditate or achieve any special state. Simply notice your breathing, not controlling it, just observing it. Breath coming in, breath going out. When thoughts arise, and they will, don't fight them. Just notice them like clouds passing through the sky. Ah, there's a thought about work. There's a thought about dinner. There's a worry about tomorrow. Don't judge the thoughts. Don't try to stop them. Just observe them from a place of stillness. Do this for 5 minutes right now. I'm serious. Pause this, set your timer, and do it. The rest of this teaching will be far more powerful if you actually experience what I'm describing, rather than just intellectually understanding it. Go ahead. I'll be here when you return. Welcome back. What did you notice? If you're like most people, you probably noticed that your mind is incredibly busy, thoughts rushing around like a river rapid. That's completely normal. But here's what's significant. If you were able to observe your thoughts, even for a few seconds, you experience something profound. You experience the part of you that exists beyond thought, the stillness that can witness the chaos without being swept away by it. That's your deep ocean. That's the part of you that nothing can disturb. The Taoists spent years cultivating this inner stillness through meditation and reflection. But you don't need years, you just need consistency. Practice this simple observation of breath for 5 minutes every morning for the next 7 days. That's it, 5 minutes. Comment below and tell me you're committing to this 7-day practice. Right, I'm starting the 7-day stillness practice. This commitment matters. It transforms passive consumption of wisdom into active transformation. Now, the second part of the practice. Once you've begun establishing inner stillness, you need to learn how to access it in real time when external disturbances arise. The Taoists called this returning to the center. Let me teach you exactly how to do this. The next time someone or something threatens to disturb your peace, a critical comment, an unexpected problem, a frustrating situation, here's what you do. First, notice the disturbance arising. You'll feel it in your body. Tension in your shoulders, tightness in your chest, heat rising in your face. The moment you notice these physical sensations, that's your cue. Pause. Don't react yet. Take 3 slow, deep breaths. As you breathe, internally say to yourself, "The still is the master of unrest." This phrase isn't magic words. It's a reminder. It recalls you back to your center. back to that deep ocean of stillness you touched in your morning practice. After 3 breaths, then respond to the situation, but now you're responding from stillness rather than from reactive emotion. This changes everything. Let me give you a specific example. Imagine your partner says something that normally would trigger an argument. Maybe they criticize the way you handled something, or they bring up an old issue you thought was resolved. Your first instinct might be to defend yourself, to counter-criticize, to prove them wrong. That's reacting from the surface, from the disturbed waves. Instead, pause. Notice the heat rising, the defensive thoughts forming. 3 breaths. The still is the master of unrest. Then respond. Maybe you say, "I hear you're upset. Help me understand what you're really concerned about." Same situation, completely different energy. You haven't suppressed your feelings. You haven't become passive. You've simply chosen to respond from your center rather than from reactivity. Practice this for the next 7 days. Every time something disturbs your peace, use the pause, breathe, center technique before responding. Keep a simple count. How many times did you successfully pause and return to center? After 7 days, come back and share your experience in the comments. Write, "Day 7 complete. I returned to center X times." This creates accountability and allows our community to support each other's practice. Now the third part, and this is where the Taoist wisdom becomes truly revolutionary. Everything I've taught you so far helps you maintain peace in the face of external disturbances. But the Taoists went further. They discovered how to create a life structure that minimizes disturbances in the first place. Not by avoiding life or hiding from challenges, but by aligning with what they called the Tao, the natural way, the flow of life itself. Here's the key insight. Most of the disturbances in your life aren't random acts of fate. They're consequences of living against the natural grain of life. The Dao De Jing teaches that when you align with the Tao, life becomes effortless. Not easy necessarily, but effortless, like flowing downstream rather than swimming upstream. Let me explain what this means practically. Think about the major sources of disturbance in your life right now. Really think about them. For most people, they fall into a few categories. Conflicts in relationships, stress from overcommitment, financial pressures from living beyond means, health issues from neglecting the body, anxiety from trying to control outcomes. Now here's the Taoist question. Which of these disturbances arise from forcing life to be other than it naturally wants to be? Which come from swimming upstream? The Taoists observed nature meticulously. They noticed that trees don't force their growth, rivers don't stress about finding the ocean, seasons don't resist changing. Everything in nature follows its inherent pattern, its natural rhythm. And when humans align with their natural rhythm, disturbances decrease dramatically. Let me tell you about another historical figure, a Taoist teacher named Liu Ling, who lived during the Jin dynasty in the 3rd century CE. Liu Ling was famous for a radical teaching. He believed that most human suffering came from forcing ourselves into unnatural patterns to meet social expectations. Historical accounts tell us that Liu Ling lived very simply, refused prestigious positions despite being offered them multiple times, and spent his days writing, walking in nature, and teaching a small group of dedicated students. His contemporaries thought he was wasting his life. They said, "Liu Ling, you're so talented. You could be an imperial advisor. You could be wealthy and powerful. Why do you live like a peasant?" Liu Ling's response captured the essence of Taoist wisdom. He said, "You see me as poor because I lack what you value. I see you as poor because you lack peace. I have chosen my riches." Historical records indicate that Liu Ling lived to be nearly 90 years old, an exceptional age for that time period, and remained mentally sharp and physically healthy until his final days. Meanwhile, many of his ambitious contemporaries died young from stress-related illnesses or were executed in political purges. The lesson isn't that you should quit your job and live in the mountains. The lesson is that Liu Ling understood something crucial. He identified what truly mattered to him: peace, wisdom, simplicity, and he structured his life around those values rather than around external expectations. He wasn't resisting society. He simply wasn't letting society disturb his peace. Now here's your third practice, and this one requires deeper reflection. I want you to take 15 minutes sometime in the next 48 hours and ask yourself 3 questions. Write down your answers. Don't just think about them, actually write them out. First question: what are the 3 biggest sources of disturbance in my life right now? Be specific. Name them. Second question: which of these disturbances am I creating or maintaining by forcing life to be other than it naturally wants to be? Which am I creating by swimming upstream? Third question, what would alignment with my natural rhythm look like in these areas? How would my life need to change? These aren't easy questions. They require brutal honesty. But the Taoists believed that clarity about truth was the foundation of transformation. Once you complete this exercise, I want you to share one insight you gained in the comments below. Right. My biggest insight from the 3 questions was, your willingness to be vulnerable and share your truth will help others do the same. That's how we build a community of awakening, not just passive viewership. Let me share my own answers to these questions because I've done this exercise myself. My 3 biggest disturbances used to be conflicts with family members who didn't understand my choices, financial stress from living in an expensive city, and constant overwhelm from saying yes to too many commitments. When I asked myself which I was creating by swimming upstream, the answer was painful but clear. All 3. I was trying to make my family understand and approve of my path rather than accepting that they might never fully understand. And that was okay. That's swimming upstream, trying to force others to change. I was living in an expensive city because I thought that's what successful people did, not because it aligned with my actual values. That's swimming upstream, forcing yourself into someone else's definition of success. I was saying yes to commitments because I feared disappointing people, not because these commitments served my genuine purpose. That's swimming upstream, living according to others' priorities rather than your own. What would alignment look like? For the family situation, it meant releasing my attachment to their approval while still maintaining loving relationships. I stopped trying to convince them and simply lived my truth with peace. The arguments decreased dramatically because I was no longer feeding the conflict with my resistance. For the financial situation, I eventually moved to a smaller, less expensive town. My stress levels dropped by half within the first month. For the commitment issue, I developed a simple practice. Before saying yes to anything, I would pause and ask, does this align with my natural rhythm, or am I forcing myself? If forcing, I would politely decline. These changes didn't happen overnight. They took months of honest self-examination and gradual adjustment. But here's what's remarkable. As I made each change, aligning more closely with my natural rhythm, the disturbances in my life decreased. Not because I was avoiding challenges or hiding from life, but because I was no longer creating unnecessary disturbances by swimming upstream. The Dao De Jing has a teaching that perfectly captures this. Chapter 37 says, "The Tao does nothing, yet leaves nothing undone." This sounds like a paradox, but it's pointing to something profound. When you align with the natural way, you accomplish more with less effort and less disturbance. You're working with life's current, rather than against it. Now I want to address something important, because I know what some of you might be thinking. This all sounds nice, but what about situations where I genuinely can't change anything? What about people who are truly toxic, or circumstances that are legitimately terrible? Are you saying I should just accept abuse or injustice? Absolutely not. This is a crucial distinction, and the Taoists were very clear about it. Accepting reality doesn't mean accepting abuse. Choosing peace doesn't mean tolerating harm. There's a difference between resistance and appropriate boundaries. Resistance is internal turmoil, fighting against what is, letting external circumstances disturb your inner state. Boundaries are external actions, protecting yourself, removing yourself from harmful situations, standing up for what's right. You can do the latter without the former. Let me give you an example. If someone is consistently disrespecting you, the resistant response would be to stay in the situation while being internally tormented, constantly arguing with reality, thinking, they shouldn't be this way, this isn't fair, why is this happening to me? That resistance is what destroys your peace. The Wu Wei response would be to calmly recognize the situation for what it is, maintain your inner stillness, and take appropriate action, which might mean setting a firm boundary or removing yourself from the relationship, or standing up for yourself, but doing so from a place of centered clarity rather than reactive emotion. The Taoists weren't passive, they were precisely effective. There's enormous strength in stillness. When you're not wasting energy on internal resistance, you have far more power to take appropriate external action. This is why Zhang Wei, the monk I mentioned earlier, created such a powerful field around himself that even invading armies left him alone. His peace wasn't weakness. It was strength so profound that it influenced everything around him. Here's a practice that helped me understand this distinction. For the next week, whenever you face a difficult situation, ask yourself 2 questions. First, am I being harmed, or is my ego being challenged? Often what we experience as disturbance to our peace is actually just our ego being challenged. Our self-image, our need to be right, our attachment to how things should be. That's resistance. Second, what action would love and wisdom take in this situation? Not reactive emotion, but centered wisdom. Sometimes wisdom says, let this go. Sometimes wisdom says, set a firm boundary. Sometimes wisdom says, leave this situation entirely. But whatever action wisdom chooses, it comes from stillness, not disturbance. Try this for 7 days. In the comments, share one example of a situation where you distinguish between ego challenge and actual harm, and what action wisdom guided you to take. Right, wisdom guided me too. This practice will fundamentally shift how you respond to life's challenges. Now, let's go deeper. I want to share with you the most advanced Taoist teaching about peace, something that took me years to understand. Everything I've taught you so far helps you protect and maintain your peace. But the ultimate Taoist teaching is this: peace isn't something you have to protect. Peace is what you are. Think about that. You are not someone who has peace that can be threatened. You are peace itself, temporarily forgetting your true nature. The disturbances you experience are like waves on the ocean's surface. They seem real, they have effects, but they're ultimately just movements within the ocean. They never disturb the ocean's essential nature. The Taoists called this recognition returning to the root, or remembering the source. When you deeply remember that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your circumstances, that you are the witnessing awareness in which all these arise, then nothing can truly disturb you. The disturbances still happen, life still brings challenges, but they're happening within you, not to you. You're the space in which they occur, not the victim of their occurrence. This might sound abstract, so let me make it concrete with a story. There's a famous Taoist tale about Zhuangzi, one of the great Taoist masters who lived in the 4th century BCE. One day, Zhuangzi's beloved wife died. His friend came to offer condolences and found Zhuangzi sitting on the ground, singing and drumming on a bowl. The friend was shocked. "Your wife just died. How can you be singing?" Zhuangzi replied, "When she first died, how could I not feel grief? But then I reflected on the natural transformations of life. Before she was born, she had no form, no life, no spirit. Somewhere in the vastness of the universe, change occurred, and she came to have spirit, then form, then life. Now there's been another change, and she has died. This is like the progression of the 4 seasons. She is now resting in the great house of the universe. For me to wail and sob would show I don't understand the way of nature, so I stopped." Now, some people misunderstand this story and think Zhuangzi was cold or unfeeling. That's not it at all. Zhuangzi felt grief. He admitted that. But he didn't resist the grief or let it destroy his fundamental peace. He understood that grief was a natural wave arising in the ocean of his consciousness, and that even grief couldn't disturb his essential nature. He experienced the emotion fully without being overwhelmed by it, or letting it disconnect him from the deeper truth of existence. This is the ultimate teaching. You can experience all of life, joy, sorrow, pleasure, pain, success, failure, without any of it disturbing your fundamental peace. Not because you've built walls around your heart, but because you've realized that you are the space in which all experience arises. You're not defending peace from disturbance. You're recognizing that peace is your nature, always present, always accessible, never actually threatened. Here's how to practice this. Right now, as you're listening to me, notice that you're aware of my words. But who or what is aware of your awareness? Notice the space of consciousness in which thoughts, feelings, and sensations arise. That space, that aware presence, is what you truly are, and that space is never disturbed. Thoughts of disturbance can arise in it, but the space itself remains spacious and clear, like the sky remains clear even when clouds pass through it. Practice this throughout your day for the next week. Whenever you notice disturbance arising, instead of trying to fix it or resist it, simply notice the space in which the disturbance is happening. Here's anxiety arising in the space of consciousness. Here's frustration arising in the space of consciousness. Here's peace arising in the space of consciousness. You're not the anxiety or frustration or even the peace. You're the consciousness in which all of these arise. From that recognition, natural peace emerges, not as something you create or maintain, but as something you remember you've always been. After practicing this for 7 days, share your experience in the comments. Right. From recognizing space, I discovered. This is the most advanced practice I'm sharing with you, and your willingness to engage with it will determine how deeply this teaching transforms your life. Let me bring all of this together with a final teaching, and then I'll give you a complete blueprint you can follow. The reason Taoists never let anyone disturb their peace isn't because they're special or because they've achieved something extraordinary. It's because they've understood something simple. Peace is not a possession that can be threatened. It's not an achievement that can be lost. Peace is the ground of being itself, always present, always accessible, waiting for you to remember it. When you understand this deeply, when you practice the techniques I've shared, something remarkable happens. The people and situations that used to disturb you still show up, but they no longer have power over your inner state. You respond to life from wisdom rather than from reaction. You set boundaries from clarity rather than from anger. You engage with challenges from strength rather than from fear. And in doing so, you become like Zhang Wei's deep ocean, unruffled by surface storms, profoundly effective in all your actions, creating a field of peace so strong that it influences everyone around you. Here's your complete 7-day blueprint for beginning this transformation. This is everything I've taught you, organized into a daily practice guide. Day 1. Begin your 5-minute breath observation practice. Just 5 minutes, first thing in the morning. Don't skip this. It's the foundation of everything else. Day 2. Continue your morning practice and add the 3-breath pause technique. Every time you notice disturbance arising, pause, breathe 3 times, recall the stillness. Day 3. Same practices, plus complete the 3-question reflection exercise. 15 minutes of honest writing about your sources of disturbance and where you're swimming upstream. Day 4. Continue all practices and begin implementing one small change toward alignment. Just one thing. Maybe it's saying no to one commitment that doesn't serve you. Maybe it's spending 15 minutes in nature. One aligned action. Days 5 through 7. Continue all practices and add the consciousness recognition exercise. Throughout your day, notice the space in which experiences arise. That's it. 7 days. If you follow this blueprint with genuine commitment, you will experience a measurable shift in your relationship with peace. It won't make all your problems disappear, but it will change your experience of them. And from that changed experience, you'll find yourself naturally making choices that align more closely with your true nature, which further reduces disturbance, which deepens your peace, which improves your choices. A positive spiral of awakening. I want to close with something personal. When I first discovered these Taoist teachings, I was skeptical. They seemed too simple to work. How could breathing and awareness practices possibly address the very real, very serious disturbances in my life? But I was desperate enough to try. And what I discovered over weeks and months of practice was that these ancient sages had uncovered something that modern psychology, neuroscience, and contemplative practices are all now confirming from their different perspectives. The source of peace isn't out there in perfect circumstances. It's in here, in the very nature of consciousness itself. And it's always been there, waiting for us to remember. You don't have to believe me. In fact, the Taoists would say, don't believe me. Test this wisdom in your own experience. That's what the 7-day practice is for. Treat it like an experiment. Commit fully for 7 days and see what happens. Then come back and share your results. Your experience will inspire others to begin their own practice, and together we create a community of awakening, not just passive consumption of wisdom. Before we end, I want you to do something right now. Close your eyes for just 30 seconds. Take 3 deep, slow breaths. As you breathe, notice the stillness that exists beneath all your thoughts and worries. Notice that even in this moment, with whatever challenges you're facing, that stillness is present. You don't have to create it or achieve it. You just have to notice it. It's been there all along. That's your true nature. That's what the Taoists discovered. That's what no one can ever disturb. Open your eyes. You've just experienced what I'm talking about. That's the foundation. Build on it with daily practice. And remember, you're not learning to protect peace from disturbance. You're learning to recognize that you are the peace that nothing can disturb. There's a profound difference. I'll be creating more teachings on specific Taoist practices for modern life, deeper dives into Wu Wei, and advanced consciousness techniques. If you found value in this, let me know by commenting with one specific insight you gained. And if you're committing to the 7-day practice, write, I commit to 7 days. That public commitment significantly increases your likelihood of following through, and it lets me know you're serious about transformation, not just entertainment. This is a journey we walk together, not teacher and student, but fellow travelers on the pathless path. The ancient Taoists walked this way. Countless seekers through the centuries have walked this way. Now it's your turn. The peace you've been seeking has been inside you all along. You don't need anyone's permission to claim it. You don't need perfect circumstances to experience it. You just need to remember what you've always been. Walk in peace. Live in alignment. Let nothing disturb the depths of your being. This is the Taoist awakening. This is your birthright. This is the ancient wisdom that changes everything once you stop just understanding it and start living it. The path is before you. The practice is clear. The choice is yours. What will you do with this wisdom in the next 7 days? Your future self is waiting for your answer.